Well, hello friends. Welcome back to the program. Today we are going to work on configuration stuff and specifically application configs. So let me show you how that works today in Serenity. In your home directory, there is a .config directory, and in here you'll find the various application settings for this user, and it's a mix of file types. So we got some INI files, some text file, some JSON, and it's not super well structured, but it has worked so far. And the way that you access these is that every application uses the config file class from libcore, which just opens the file, parses it, and gives you an interface to fetch and store values. At least that's for INI files. And then for JSON and text files, you have to do your own custom thing. But today, I would like to take a step forward towards making this a little bit more sophisticated. So one big drawback with the current system is that every application has to have file system access to this directory. And it's also a bit annoying because every application has to manage, like, what if the file is externally edited, for example, and basically no app reacts correctly to that. And the idea that I have here is that we should build a sort of config server that manages these things. So we can still keep the same files for now, at least, so that you can go and edit them and look at them if you want. But we will have a config server that the applications communicate with to load and store keys to these things. And that's sort of what we're going to start building today. And then we will see what type of architecture takes shape around this idea and where we can go with it. So yeah. So let's start by just adding a new service. So that goes in userland services. We'll call it config server. Or settings server. No, config server. I like that better. And then let's copy some existing server config file into there. Like we will take notification server. So we'll take these CMake, or actually let's just take everything and then edit the stuff. Because there's a bunch of boilerplate stuff when we add a new IPC service. So let's see, we don't need the notification window because this thing is not going to have a GUI. But it will have an IPC protocol definition. So this will be the config server. Definitely a required component. So we'll call these config server endpoint and config client endpoint. Yeah, because it would be so cool if you can learn via IPC that your configuration has changed. So you would get a callback in the main loop of your program to react to that. I think that's one of these things that does not feel very polished today in Serenity, is that you have to restart an application if you edit the settings. So we can definitely do better. So let's see, config server. We do not need libgui. Yeah. So just doing the basic transformation of notification server into config server here. And then maybe let's go here and see config server IPC. Let's edit the, oh wait, let me add this to the CMake list. Config server. Okay. So what kind of API do we need here? I guess, well, let's start with just the basics, like reading and writing keys. So read, let's look at our existing API. So config file has a handful of read entry things. So we have read entry, which gives you a string, and then we have read num entry and read bool entry. And then we have the same for write, and we also have write color entry for some reason. There's no read color entry. It's a little bit weird. But regardless, we should probably look into making the config server provide like a bit more strongly typed values. But in this first cut, we're just going to mimic the existing config file API. So I think we'll have read string entry, and well, let's see. When you connect to this thing, I guess I was thinking, like, should you set the equivalent of a file name so that, like, if you are the file manager application, would you make a connection and then say, hello, I am file manager, and then config server opens the file manager.ini for this connection? Or alternatively, we could make it part of every API request so that the read string entry would sort of have a string domain, string key or something like that, group string key, and then that will be whatever we had in the file manager settings. Let's go and look at them actually. Home non-config. So file manager has these things here. So like layout, show toolbar 1. And then what you would do is something like config read string entry, file manager, layout. I feel like there are some benefits to that because if you have settings for a library, for example, so like say that libgui has settings of its own, then they could just be in the libgui domain, and you don't have to sort of scope your connection to the file manager domain. But yeah, I think that might be a good idea. So let's do that. And let's make these synchronous because you can't really proceed without knowing the configuration setting. Okay. We'll call it read string value. Yeah. And then let's just name these a little bit better. So I32 instead of num. Bool can still be bool though. Okay. And then let's have the equivalent write operation. So write string value. And we can add more value types later, but I feel like this is going to be a good start. And should we report success or failure here? Let's just, I mean, what would we do if it failed? We would have to say like, oh, I cannot update that config value. That doesn't sound like something we can meaningfully respond to. So if that fails, so these mean that these APIs are asynchronous. So the arrow points to the return value normally, but if you do this, then it doesn't point at anything. So that's how we say that these are asynchronous APIs. So like this and that. There we go. Yeah, I feel like that's a reasonable API surface for the first cut. And let's just start with nothing in the config client. Okay. And then let's see. So this thing is going to start on system startup, which means that we have to add it to the etc system server ini. Maybe we'll put it at the very first top here. Temp portal config. And I guess we want, let's see. So this one is going to be per user, I guess. So we'll do this for now. Say user anon. And wait, do I have to say all these things? I don't think so. Yeah, we'll just do that. Okay. And then I'm just reminding myself how all of this stuff works. So we don't need a GUI application. We just need a core event loop. That's how you do that, right? Core event loop. Yeah. Just transforming this thing so that it creates the right type and everything. And we don't have a GUI application, but we do have an event loop. So we can just do that. And I don't think we need to receive or send file descriptors. But we do need to be able to write and create files possibly. But we should probably limit ourselves to, well, let's just put this for now, but it should really be like, or actually, we have a thing for that. What's it called? Standard paths? The core standard paths? Yeah, so we want to limit this thing so that it can only access files in the user's config directory. Yes, so that would be like home anon.config. And it will not be able to access anything outside of that. And this makes me think about stuff like, what if you would have sort of a system level config and a user level config, and if the user level config is missing, then it just falls back to the system config? Maybe that's something that would be cool, but let's not go deep on that right now. We're just gonna, first thing is to just build the server and make somebody get their config that way. And then once we have everybody talking to the server, it becomes much easier to experiment with other ideas like that. So I don't think we need those. Let's see. So the pledge here, the basic idea of this pledge is that we need the Unix pledge when we are starting up so that we can, at least I think we need it when we take over the socket. Do we though? We might not even need that because the system server has already, it gives us a server socket in like this socket handover procedure. So system server spawns config server, and then config server just inherits that socket. So there should be no need to create a new one. So I think maybe that pledge is tight enough for the entire thing. And maybe we can unveil early here as well. Let's try it. Okay. It looks really tight, actually. That's quite nice. All right. So next step is to, of course, tweak this thing so that it becomes not notification server, but rather config server. So more of this good stuff. In fact, maybe I should just do a search and replace notification config and Let's do a build pass just to try to get it to generate some IPC files. Did that work? Multiple implementations. Oh, wait, hold on. There's been some trouble with the mark as excluded recently in C-Line, but they released an update for it yesterday, and that's the one I'm running here, so should be working. Is that working? Wait, it does not appear to be working though. Dang it. Or wait, no. Okay, well that's a bit frustrating. So let me just switch to the an older version of C-Line here, because there's this bug in the latest version of C-Line, which I thought was fixed, but it's not, where they find files in the build directory that happen to have the same name as files in your source directory. And then when you try to like jump to definition, it includes random stuff in the build directory, which should not be included. So that's a bit acid too. So anyways, let's reorient ourselves. So config server, main, okay. And then client connection. All right, so that's not found. That sounds more plausible. So what's the problem? Config client endpoint. Oh, right. Let me actually clean this thing up so that it doesn't have all this notification gunk. So client should have nothing actually. And config server. So get rid of those. Oh man, it's been so long since I added a new server of any kind. A little bit confusing. So let's see, let's do that search and replace here also. Sure, and then nuking all those irrelevant APIs. Yeah, and then we just need to actually, I don't know why it's not finding this thing though. Config client endpoint. Config client endpoint. Config client endpoint. It is here in the build. Oh, maybe it's because of x86-64. I have my IDE pointed at the 64-bit build. So let's see what happens if we just try to build the config server here. Should be pretty fast. Ah, look at that. The red squigglies went away. All right, there we go. Now this thing works. Okay, so we just need to add some of these virtuals. Sure, we can do that. So taking these and just put override here at the end. Okay, no big deal. There we go. Die overrides a function but is not marked override. Wait, what? It is marked override though. What are you mad about? Okay. That might be some clanged thing. It's very clearly marked override, dude. Yeah, clanged is complaints about things sometimes that don't exactly make sense. But overall, it's a very useful tool. Just, it gets a little confused sometimes. But we have a friend on the Clang team, hoping that he's on top of the situation. But we'll see. Okay, now we are just spacing these out, making things nice. Also, they don't exactly look great with all these maybe unused, but we don't need those here, obviously. In fact, I don't know why they were in the header. Why are those in the header? Like maybe unused like this. If you're just declaring the function and is not in line, why do you need this? That seems like, I don't know, this seems kind of superfluous. Anyway, let's be a little bit smarter and search and replace. Okay. And finally, client connection, : : Okay, we are getting there slowly. Okay. So the simplest possible way to implement this thing, I guess, is to just open the config file based on the inputs here and like just do the whole thing. So let's do that. We don't have to get fancy at all, although later on we should get fancy and cache the stuff and maybe have a file system notifier, something like that, so that we don't like reload the things over and over. But for now, let's build it the simple way. So config is core config file, open for app domain. And this API is quite goofy actually, because it cannot fail, which is a bit weird, but that's how it is. So probably this work will eventually include improving this thing or replacing it with something a bit more sane, like something that actually understands that failure is a possible thing and deals with that in some responsible way. But for now, we can simply do config. Wait, what is the read string value response actually? Oh, it just wants a string. Okay. So config, read entry, group key, and yeah, that's probably actually it. So, and we can just wrap our API like this. Bloop. Okay. And for writing entries, same basic idea, but instead we have write entry, group key value. Okay, so I think we have now constructed our config server, at least the first version of it. And now we need a way to connect to this thing, of course. So let's make a library for that. And let's call it libconfig. So it will be similar to libprotocol, for example. Actually, libprotocol should probably change name, because libprotocol used to connect to to protocol server, but protocol server was renamed to request server. So why is this not librequest? And other interesting questions. Anyway, so libprotocol, let's just, oh, you know what? Let's actually use the notification library for this. No, there's no notification library. That's part of the GUI library. File system access client. What does he have? That's another, it's like a simple wrapper library around an IPC protocol. So let's use that as a template then. Libconfig. Ah, dang it. Okay, wait. Come on, command line, you can do this. Boom. Still got it. Okay, so we just want to use config server, file system access server. That's quite a mouthful. If you're not familiar, the FSAS, file system access server, is a new service that mediates application access to the file system so that you can sandbox an application like text editor so that it has no file system access. And then you allow it to speak to file system access server, and file system access server can open up like an open file dialog, and then you select a file, and then by doing that you give that open file to a text editor, but text editor itself has no access to the file system. So it's sort of it's an interesting way to allow sandboxing and separate out that stuff into a separate app. We didn't really exploit that fully yet, but there's ongoing work. But let's not get distracted with talking about that. So config client endpoint. Yeah, so should we call that? No, just libconfig is fine. Yeah, I think libconfig is a good name. Does not depend on Windows Server. Okay. Libconfig. Oh, I have to add it to here. Libconfig, alphabet, and boom. Okay, so then of course libconfig needs to be a little bit different. So Timot did not write this. Also, Timot, that email address is upside down. That's so cute. MMWW. Okay, what did I say about distractions, Andreas? Okay. So reload CMake and config server. Wonder why it doesn't get picked up by the thing, but anyway, let's ignore that. So config, and this of course will have a much simpler API. You don't need a complex result class or anything like that. So we'll just have config server, config client endpoint, config server endpoint, sure. Okay. And then our APIs are going to be void read string value. And we can even do this. So domain. Also, we don't need to pass string view by const reference, I think. Does that matter? Probably doesn't matter. So let's see, string view domain, string view group, string view key. And of course, these should return string, i32 and bool. Interesting also that these will always return something. I don't know if that's actually clever. Oh, because the config file API takes a default value. So this is what you get if there's nothing in there. This is a pattern that we have in Serenity that I'm not hugely fond of, where like invocations of this thing, you do like read num entry, right? And then you pass in some default value. And you have these default values kind of scattered throughout the code base. And they're just hard coded in the apps. And I always feel like this is kind of, I don't know, it feels crappy somehow to have these defaults hard coded in the apps. But I'm not sure exactly what would be a better solution. I guess for now, in order to support being able to always return something, we should, the API should like have a mechanism for default fallback. So maybe we should make the IPC API return optional, and then we can handle the fallback in the client. Let's say. That's probably okay. So yeah. We'll call it the fallback. And do you have to provide a fallback, or how does that work? Default value. Yeah, okay, so there are like some default fallback values, some default values. Also, I like fallback better than default. So let's do that and that and false, I guess. Yeah. String view key and string view value. I'm just sketching out the API here. So this is, of course, the client-side API that you use in your application. So we're going to figure this all out eventually. Okay, and of course we want to connect to temporal config, and this should be a config client endpoint. Yes. Okay. And we don't have any virtuals to handle here, and nothing to worry about really. So this is very straightforward. But let's do that. Let's make the API return optionals. So these guys right here, let's do this. And then if they don't have that value, they can just say, oh, I don't have that, bro. That'll be fine. Okay. And then I guess we have to ask the file about that. So if config has, wait, do we have to do both of those? Or we can do has key. Okay. So has key, group key. So if we don't have it, we'll return optional string. Something like that. Wait, what am I trying to do here? Oh, I have to regenerate the files. Wait, why doesn't that work? Oh, yeah, because that would be two implicit conversions. Okay. Right. So then let's just do the same song and dance, except this one is I32. And this one is bouillon. Okay. Could we do that? Nope. All right, so we are in decent shape. Okay, we have if we want to build a whole system, there's a bit to do here, so let's just do that. In the meantime, let's look at how we would integrate this somewhere. So in File Manager, for example. So we have a config right here. So the way we would use this instead now, so it would include libconfig client.h. And then we would do something like auto left is config client the read I32 value, file manager, window, left 150, right? I think that's it. So it's a bit verbose. Maybe we should I feel like something like that would be a bit nicer. So if you didn't have to say the whole thing, like client the. So let's have some convenience API for that. So inline string, yeah, let's just inline these things here. I don't know. I don't know if I love this, but I feel like this is gonna get really noisy if we don't do something like this. So return client the read string value domain group key fallback. Yeah. And of course, these don't have to return anything, they just write. But I think this is gonna be kind of nice. Let's see what we feel about it when we try using it a little bit. So save that, and then we don't have to say that part, so we can just do that. Yeah, that's kind of neat. So it's not that much more verbose than before. Really, like the verbosity is all from including the domain now. But I suspect that will probably help like legibility in general, because now from just looking at this one line here, you know exactly which config value gets fetched. It's in the file manager domain, right? Whereas previously you would have to go and track down this object where it comes from and figure out what file it points to. So that seems like an upgrade to me. So let's see if we can do a little bit of sophisticated editing here and just convert this code. Obviously, this is not going to be as fast as what we had before, but let's ignore that. Also, what do you mean breadcrumb bar is not a word? Breadcrumb bar is totally a word. Okay, let me just delete the config thing and then we'll figure out what breaks. So Alt 6 and boom. Read bool entry. Okay, so config, read bool entry, file manager. Oh, value, right. I think value is better than entry. Okay, so config, write bool value, file manager, and here notice the call to sync. This is what forces it to write it out. But now we don't need this anymore. And that's something that's also nice, is that the config server can now take care of serializing access in a way that was a bit willy-nilly when we were just accessing the files ourselves. So that seems like a positive improvement as well. So read bool value, file manager. Now the file manager spam is a little bit noisy, but I think I still like it. No need for sync. Okay. Oh, there's a whole bunch of these. Folder pane, on the other hand, is probably not a word. I feel like that's 2 words. But I don't want to edit that right now because we are not here to edit unrelated things. Oh, there are many more. All right, well, we're gonna get through this. I'm already liking this so much, and it doesn't even do anything fancy yet. This just feels like one of those things that has been in need of just a look over for a very long time. It's not a spelling error, C-line. I wonder if we could make C-line aware of ampersand things somehow. But let's not get distracted with that. So config, write bool value, get rid of that, config, read bool value, file manager, config. Oh, and here comes a text editing challenge. Wait, can we do this with multiple cursors? Okay, let's try it. Config, write i32 value, file manager. Ooh, look at that. All you people who keep telling me I should use multiple cursors, are you happy? Multiple cursors are really sweet. I often forget to use them, and then I remember them when it's too late, but this time I remembered. Okay, so I wonder if we're in good enough shape to compile this. Almost. Okay, let's just let it build in the background. Config. Yeah, okay, so there are a bunch of these that we need to fix. So here's an instance of File Manager actually loading a different config domain. So it's opening the window manager file, which I don't even know why it's called that. It's like, should be Windows Server, really? And it's doing that to fetch the wallpaper. Why is it doing that? The wallpaper. Oh, File Manager is the thing that sets the wallpaper on startup. Oh, interesting. I totally forgot about that. Did I do that? Luke did that. File Manager, apply wallpaper on startup. Right. So I guess nobody was doing that before. So, I mean, it seems kind of sensible, although maybe Windows Server should be doing this. But for now, it's still like, it's a situation where we're opening a different config domain. So as you can see, it loads like a different file. Now, we can just do that by passing a different domain to the thing. So read string value, window manager. I guess Windows Server doesn't do this because Windows Server does not run as the window user, or does it? Wait, I forgot how we set this up now. Window, oh no, it runs as its own user, right? So Windows Server runs as a dedicated user, and so it does not have access to my user-specific config files. That's why my user-specific desktop process, like the thing that renders the desktop icons and stuff, that's the thing that opens my config and sets the wallpaper. So that kind of makes sense. We should probably change the domain name here, but okay. Well, that's then we have those ducks sort of in a row, if you will. Right, so then let's get rid of this configuration. We don't need that. Don't need to be passing these around anymore. Glook, glook, glook. Read directory, read mode from config. That's one of those like comments that explain exactly what the code is doing, but kind of in a not great way. So let's just get rid of that. And let's see, config file. So, I mean, we can keep that comment. So config file, let's get rid of that. And these are not being passed anymore. So let's get rid of those. And File Manager is now config file free. So we need to, link it against libconfig now. So File Manager, link against libconfig. Config client wait, what happened with that? Config client.h. We had this thing, but we never instantiate that thing. Wait, how should this work? I guess we don't need to like keep reconnecting to the config server. Like, let's open a connection on startup and keep it. I think that's better. So we'll do that in here, but wait, where are we? Oh. Wait, this API doesn't look at all like what I want. Oh, because did I not implement this API? I guess I didn't. I just wrote out the header. All right. It's funny, that thing, when you do part of a task and then you think that you did the whole thing because you have such a strong understanding of what the task includes that it feels like it's finished when it is not. Right. So wait, what is open? Oh, interesting. Okay. So let's go ahead and nuke these APIs. Do we need a die? Maybe we don't even need that. Or wait, hold on. That was pure virtual in the base class, I think. If you don't want your app to exit if it loses the connection. So if we lose the connection to config server, we want to die. Because if config server rejects us, I don't think we are in a healthy state. So let's just die if that happens, which means that we don't need to override die. Yeah. Okay, so string client read string value. Oh, we have a connection. So oh, it's been too long since I did one of these. Damn it. What is the thing that I'm looking for? Wait, so do I have a bunch of APIs that I can just call here? Async read string value. Oh, wait, shit. Read string value, but that's async. I don't want to use the async version. I want to use this version right here. Oh. Okay, so there's a bit of name overload here. So we have a read string value internally that does not take a fallback. But the fallback has a default value, so this could get messy actually. Let's see. So that would be domain group key. I don't think this is healthy, right? Because we're inheriting from config client endpoint. Or no, what am I even thinking of? I'm inheriting from this thing that has read string value, but that's just this thing. So if I could call that without the default param. Oh, but let's just not make these mandatory so that the overload resolution works. Which it doesn't anyway. Okay. Read string value. Maybe the value suffix is superfluous anyway. Maybe the API should look like this. Read string, read I32, read bool. That's a bit nicer maybe. Yeah. Yeah, let's do that. Okay. Okay. What did I say about multi-cursor? Make use of it. Glook. Oh. Okay. Okay, and then if value does not have a value, then we return the fallback. Or we can also express this like this, value or fallback. Glook, glook, glook. Okay, so expressive. That's actually pretty nice. value or fallback. Right. Yeah, now we're getting back on track here. No, that's not what I wanted to do. Okay. So write looks like that, and that simply does write string value. Oh, that's always async, right? So domain group key value. Yeah. Oops. This is going to be very, very, very nice, I think. Yeah. Okay, so then of course here we have to we have a bunch of these have to be changed now. So write bool value becomes simply write bool. Write i32 value becomes write i32. Okay. Oh, and we had some strings also. Read string value. Ah, dang it. Strinf. Okay. So we have managed to build. Let's see if it manages to run. Oh, we have a desktop. And we have a regular file manager. And let's, I guess, change the mode to table view, exit, open. It did not open in the correct mode. So, okay, let's see. So config server complains that it cannot write. Okay, so what's up with that? We don't know. Oh, when we are trying to, IO device write, bad FD number. So something is definitely wrong with our connection. I think it's trying to set the value anytime I do this. Yeah. All right. So what is going wrong? Did we get any other errors, by the way? Let's do a fresh start here. So not a word so far. Not a word, sure. And then try to do anything and you get a bunch of these. Which makes me wonder, are we hanging up on the other side or something like that? Let's see, libconfig client. So presumably when we're writing, we're just sending these async things. But this thing should be persistent. Wait, let's see what kind of requests are coming in here. So config server. Let's see, write string value. Well, we don't need return statements in here because these are void. But let's just log that we're getting something here. So domain group key value, let's say. I think these could be interesting. Okay, so it tries to write. So that all seems fine. I wonder if it's failing to write to the config file then, because maybe the IPC is working right and it's just that it can't actually open the file correctly. And maybe that ties into what I was talking about with the config files being that the open APIs cannot fail. As you see here, it always returns a config file. It cannot signal failure. So maybe we're screwing up on that front. Let's see. I guess we can let's log the config file name here. So file name like that, maybe. Yes, I think that would be sweet. Well, I should have been able to open that file. But am I? Let's take a look with system monitors. We have config server right here. Look at unveiled paths. He has a home and non-config, read, write, create. Oh, wait, shoot. Do we have to say something to, I see. Allow writing is no by default. Yeah, so obviously we need to open these writable in the implementation of the various write IPC calls. So that's what's going wrong. So core config file, allow writing, yes. Let's do that, and then we shouldn't need these anymore. So let's see. Click, click, click. And now if we close it, click, open it back up, it's in table mode. That's so cool. Okay, so now File Manager has all of its settings managed by config server. And then of course, config server just turns around and looks at the exact same file that File Manager was previously accessing manually, but that's not an issue. So File Manager, of course, doesn't do this thing where it unveils the .config directory because it's a file manager. It has to be able to see the entire file system in order to do its job. So in that sense, it was maybe like not the best app to start with. So let's look at one that unveils its config directory in some way. So yeah, as you can see here, we have a ton of apps that make an exception to the unveil sandbox in order to access their config file. So Which one do we start with? How about the terminal? Because we use terminal a lot. So instead of unveiling your config file as writable, what we want to do instead is just unveil access to the config IPC portal. And let's see if we can port terminal to use this API. So libconfig client, and then get rid of config file. Yep. And then here's something where it tries to create the config directory if it does not exist. We don't have to be concerned with things like that anymore. Yeah, so config read string entry terminal startup command. No, not entry, just read string. Yeah. This is pretty nice, actually. Then we don't need to be passing the config around either. So config read string. Okay. Yeah, so I guess we can do a conversion here. So read I32. Config write I32. Bloop. Ooh, the font. Definitely want to remember the font that you're using for the terminal. So, like, we have a bunch of these sync calls to config file in weird places. And it's really nice to just get rid of them because, yeah, our configuration system has not been very consistent and stable in Serenity. So we are making very nice progress here, I think, on this. So let's see. Terminal widget does not take the config anymore. Sure, config. Get rid of that. You don't need to take that. Let's see. I was going to take some responsibility, but we've already been here. Let's do this. Okay. So terminal widget. And then we have to, of course, update all of the stuff inside the widget that accesses mconfig. So libconfig client.h is maybe a bit weird of a name, but for now it's probably fine. And then I'm kind of thinking about these domain names. Like at the moment, terminal is fine, but if we want to be a bit more fancy, we could consider doing something like, you know, like these Apple style reverse domain names, like org.serenityos.terminal, something like that, so that it would play nice with other applications that might want to use the same system or something like that. But yeah, for now, let's just do this. Oops. Config, read i32, terminal. Yeah. Okay, let's see if that builds. Almost. Terminal wrapper. Wait, who's doing that? And Hack Studio. Oh. Right. Yeah, so Hack Studio does no longer need to open the terminal config file, which is nice. But anybody who embeds a terminal now also needs to link against libconfig. So let's make sure we take care of that in libvt so that you get the implicit dependency. And look at that, it just works. Let's change the opacity, exit out, start a new terminal, and it has the cool opacity. Yeah, so this thing is basically working as intended. We have now successfully removed the ability for terminal to access the config file, and it has to do mediated access through config server instead. If we look at terminal here, we can see that it has a portal to the config here instead. And we can definitely do other stuff with this, like to prevent applications from accessing other apps configurations. We should probably do something like a pledge mechanism for the config server, so that when you connect, you say, I'm going to access these domains. And then once you have told it that, it will not let you access any other domains. I think that would probably be healthy. Because as it is right now, of course, you can access any config from terminal. So it is an improvement that we should make. But let's do some commits here, because I think we need to commit that config server and libconfig. So let's commit those. And this guy right here. Yeah. Userland. Introduce config server and libconfig. Config server is an IPC service that provides serialized or mediated, provides, what do we call it? Provides access to application configuration and settings. The idea is to replace all uses of core config file with IPC requests to config server. The API, this first cut, the API is very similar to core config file. So core config file. Let's say that you have a config file, read entry foo bar, or wait, what do we call these? Group key. Open for app, app. be with core config file. Well, let's say the old, the new, config read string app group key is, let's say, pretty similar to config server uses the .config directory as its backing store, and all the files remain human editable. Yeah, I think that's really the killer feature here, is that we're building a config server that makes it easier for apps to deal with configuration while not losing the awesome benefit of human readable, human editable config files. Because I think that's something that I really value, like the fact that I can go and look at the config file in a text editor if I want to. If I want to make a copy of it or tweak something or whatever, I know that I can do that. It gives me sort of, it gives me this confidence about the system that I have a handle on it, if that makes sense. And it's something I really don't want to lose. So let's see. Let's port these, and then let's add that where you pledge which domains you're going to use. Let's add that after committing these ports here. So let's do file manager first, because we did that one first. So file manager. Use config server. Use libconfig instead of core config file. Yeah. Terminal plus libvt. Use use libconfig instead of core config file. Yes, but let's do the pledge thing. So how do we do that? We need to define an API for that in the IPC def. So here we'll say like, wait, what do we say? We say like pledge domains. Something like that. And you'll do this once on startup. And config server will just disconnect you if you screw around. So if you call this twice, or if you send something that does not make sense, it will just disconnect you. Yeah, I think that would make sense. So config client, we'll add something here like pledge domains. Yeah. Why am I sweating this API so much? Just something like that. Sure, and then how do we implement that? Well, oh, yeah, well, I didn't think that through. It has to be string anyway. That's okay though. And then the way that we use this is when we start up here, let's say config pledge domains, file manager, and window manager for that, for that wallpaper thing. Oops. And then for the this is probably okay. I was just thinking about libraries. Like if you want to, if you're linking as a library who needs access to its library domain, but let's not overthink that. So wait, what did I do here? Oh, I have to give it a name, right? Domains. Let's not overthink the whole library domain concept right now. We'll get there. And then client connection needs to implement this thing. So pledge domains. Sure. Let's put these in a hash table. Pledged domains. Oh, and then let's have something here like bool m has pledged. And then if you try to pledge twice, if has pledged, did misbehave, bruh. That's a no-no. To pledge domains twice. Yep, can't be having that. Okay, and then at that point, we will say now you have pledged, and your pledge includes all of the domains here. So for auto, domain in domains, pledge domains, set domain. Okay, and then if you don't pledge anything, then we will let you access everything, just like how pledge works in the kernel as well. So this is kind of analogous to that. So if we have a pledge and pledge domains does not contain domain, we can say did misbehave. Oh, I have to create a string here. So string formatted invalid or attempt to access domain, invalid attempt to access domain, domain. Let's say blocked attempt to access domain. Group, I guess we can say this, right? Group key characters, and then return like that. Oh no, that does not work. We have to do that. Oh, null putter. Okay, well that makes sense. Right, so let's do that in all of these things. And should probably encapsulate that in a function instead of copy pasting it, now that I think about it. If not validate access domain, return null putter. Yes, that's a lot better. Then we will have a little helper for that. Domain const. Or you know what, let's not make that const so that we can call did misbehave. Bool client connection, validate access. So if there's no pledge, that's okay. Access granted. If the pledge domains contains it, we are good. Otherwise, we are not good. Also, I realize now that I should have included the group and key here. So we'll take care of that, and we are cool. Key and boom. All right. So then we just have to tweak the calls, group and key. Clickety clook. Okay. Yeah, and trying to write, I'll just do nothing. The error is not signaled to the caller, but he will be disconnected actually. So he will learn that he did something wrong. Because config server, when you do invoke the did misbehave thingy, then it disconnects the client, because if the client misbehaves, then the server wants nothing to do with it anymore, which I think is pretty fair. Because, you know, the client has violated some part of the contract. And it seems like maybe that's what we were doing right here. File manager. We have a null dereference. Oh my goodness, what did I do? Okay, we have a null deref in file manager. Config client notifier. Wait, are we getting disconnected maybe? Let's see. Pledge domains. So if you don't do that, is everything still fine? Let's just check. Yeah, it's all good until you try to pledge domains. So why did you not like that? Async pledge domains, sure. I'm not exactly sure what I'm screwing up here, but it's definitely something. So config server. It's just saying nothing. Okay. Well, I guess we were rejecting an access for some reason. But are we not printing these out? We should be debug lining them. We should say like, oh, misbehave for whatever reason. So let's just do this. pledge domain. Domain. And then we always return true so that nothing is considered a bad access. That's still crashy. What? Okay. So is it this thing then? Pledge domains, M has pledged. Or let's like not do anything then. That's weird. What is going on here? Starting to get the feeling that something goes wrong when I try to send a vector of string over IPC. Doesn't anybody do that? Let's see, vector of string, userland, and then grep for IPC. So, no, we definitely send vector of string. Like, why wouldn't you be allowed to send a vector of string? That's so strange. Okay, so, well, I guess we'll have to debug it then. So what is your problem, sir? So we were getting some null dereferences in notifier, I think. What are these even? It keeps crashing because it tries to start a new file manager. Client the. So we're instantiating the connection. And something goes wrong with that. So we're in main. Sure. Oh, wait, back up. Oh, are we doing something really dumb here? Like we're trying to do this before we have an event loop. Ooh. Okay, well that's pretty nasty actually, the fact that that just falls apart like that. But if you do it here, it should be fine. I can do it after pledging. Okay, so this thing is sensitive to having an event loop. That's good to know. Yeah, that makes more sense. So then pledges are coming in and everything. So let's see. So two things to do here. Of course, step one is to undo all of this debug code we put here. Click clack. And then we want to probably, like, let's have a nice error for ourselves. So if you try to instantiate this thing before there's an event loop, core event loop, what happens if there isn't one? Like, there's no way to look that up? That's a bit goofy. Like, we should have at least some way to check that. Like, if there's if the main event loop is down, or if it doesn't exist yet, let's have a getter. Has been instantiated. Let's just have something like this, right? As main event loop. Yeah, so that one exists, and then we can assert that which will make it a bit easier to spot this problem in the future if you accidentally step into this trap. So verify that core event loop has been instantiated, and we will only do that when attempting to construct, so that we don't have to check that every time, but we can check it when we attempt to construct it. And then if we do that before the event loop exists, then I have to rebuild a lot because I changed the famous event loop.h. So let's pour some more tea here while we rebuild. And somebody recently asked me, like, how come in my videos I'm able to rebuild so fast? When they build Serenity, it takes a long time. And usually the reason that I have fast rebuilds is because I only rebuild very little. I'm particularly careful with my text editing to avoid like dirtying dependencies that bring in like a large incremental rebuild. And it's just a discipline that I've learned over the years from working on really large projects, where you just you touch the wrong header file enough times to sit through like a half-hour rebuild, and then you learn to work around this. So that's the reason that you don't tend to see many large rebuilds in my videos, because I like consciously avoid them as much as I can. But of course, sometimes you have to edit something. Yeah, so now we get this thing here instead. Assertion failed. Event loop has been instantiated. So that should be significantly easier to debug next time. So let's move that to there. And then we'll add a way to check that. So libcore add core event loop has been instantiated. This static bool getter can be used to verify that an event loop exists. If in situations where debugging would be where one is expected. This is helpful if the absence of an event loop would generate strange and or loud errors that don't immediately point to their cause, point to this as a cause. Yeah. And then let's add that sanity check here. So we'll only do that one in this commit. Libconfig, verify that core event loop exists before connecting. Let's say commitment. It's not possible to connect to config server without having an event loop available. This verify makes it much easier to understand why things are not working. Okay, and then let's do our new pledge domains API. So pledge domains. Config server plus libconfig add pledge domains API. This API let's config server client. Let's applications specify which configuration domains they will be accessing throughout their lifetime. It works similarly in spirit to the kernel's pledge. On startup, let's see, you cannot pledge domains more than once. And once you have used it, it's no longer possible to access any other configuration domain. This is a first cut. This is obviously just a first cut of this mechanism, and we may need to tweak it further as we go. But I do think that's generally a sensible thing to do. So file manager, use config pledge domains. And terminal main also has to pledge some domains. Let's see, where is main here? So we go here. Terminal. Oh, it's kind of tempting to add a convenience API that takes a single string so that I don't have to wrap it in a vector. Yeah, let's do that. Yeah, and then what happens if we pledge another domain like foo here instead of terminal? Then we should get into trouble because we're trying to access some config that does not belong to us. And yes, terminal crashes because read string fails, we get disconnected. That's very, very good. And config server complaints here. Yeah, so client misbehaved, blocked attempt to access domain terminal, startup command. Very cool. And then what happens if you try to do this? Terminal, not terminal. So you try to call it twice. Let's just check that that also does not work. Bloop. No, we just get disconnected. Yeah, tried to pledge domains twice, disconnecting. So we just get kicked out. Yeah, that's very, very good. Okay. So let's see. Let's do that pledge, the convenience API for a single domain. Let's just add that as a fix up to the previous one. Fix up. And terminal use config pledge domains. All right. Then let's bring that fix up into here and klook. Great. All right. So I think we have made some very nice progress here, and Maybe this will be it for today's video. So just to recap, what we have done is build a config server, which manages the files in the .config directory. And we have a libconfig that user space applications can use to interact with the config server. And the file manager and terminal applications now access their configuration files via the config server. So I think that's super dandy. And I think there's a whole slew of things that we can build on top of this new mechanism. So that's going to be fun. So if you made it this far, then I thank you for watching and for hanging out. I hope that you saw something interesting here today. And I am pretty happy with this. And obviously it's still quite rough around the edges, but we'll iterate and see where we end up. So thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all next time. Bye.